This week on the Orange Box podcast, we talk about the truth behind Bluepoint's closing, PlayStation reportedly ending PC support with single-player games, and more. All of this tonight, but first, on to the new Beautiful Bean intro. Welcome to the place where PC and console gaming talk combine. This is the Orange Box Podcast, episode 126. I am your host, the man who just found out that he is a brother, Nathan, also known as the Frozen Gamer 87. And joining me, as always, the man who will be releasing each instrument track for the full Orange Box Podcast theme on separate Game Boy-style cartridges, requiring a separate Game Boy music player for each one to hear the full theme all at once, Justin, better known as I Am Zaracon. How you doing today? How's your week been?
It's been not as, I guess, fulfilling as I would have liked. I mean, I got a lot of stuff done around the house this weekend, but despite all that, I still felt like I didn't get much accomplished, which is, I guess, odd to say. So over the course of, say, the past few days, I had been deciding if I wanted to get something possibly for a future video, and I was debating about it, and I said, okay, I'll go ahead and get it. But then I saw there were a couple things, and there was one thing where I was like, all right, this is very relatively cheap, and I said I could get that, but then I said, well, I see this other thing that I could get, and it definitely would be, I guess, more suitable for what I'm aiming to do, but that is way more expensive. And at the end of the day, I said, I'm really only going to be using this for one video, essentially. So I said, I think it's probably just best if I get the cheaper thing and call it a day. Maybe sometime down the road I might come back to it and use it, but I highly find that unlikely. So I got that, and that should be coming in maybe Friday, Saturday, but after that it'll just be a matter of getting everything set up for that so I can do that, and then I'd have to take care of a couple other things to get those things recorded. But yeah, that's probably gonna be something that I put out within the next month or so, just because of the different things I have to set up. And then I guess lastly, we've been having a bit of a music league at my job for my as far as like the team, and every couple of days we have a new song that we put out there, and each round has its own particular theme, and so we pick a song, submit it, and then people vote each round and whatnot. And this upcoming round, I am going to be selecting something from Expedition 33.
Nice.
Because the theme for that round is songs with essentially a song with a error in the title, and I'm picking Our Drafts Collides just because it is grammatically off there, even though the lyrics actually do have Our Drafts Collide, but for some reason the title has Our Drafts Collides. So I'm selecting that one. I don't expect to get too many votes from the crowd, but you know what, if anyone is cultured enough, they will vote for that. But yeah, that is my week in a nutshell.
All right. Well, let's see here. My week has been a very interesting week, to say the least. So first of all, I just want to mention the thing I referenced in the intro. My older sister had done some Ancestry.com stuff, and she found out that apparently our fourth great-grandfather, so 6 generations back, was black. was a black man who gained the right to vote in I think it was in like 1870. Or no, well, I don't know the exact year. I didn't get it. There wasn't any way for me to actually look at the story, but his name was John Carr Burnett. And apparently he was a black man. Now, the one thing, I mean, I'm skeptical about it because it's like, I mean, it's not impossible, you know, going that far back, you know, there could be enough mixing and everything to where we just end up being back to very, very white. But I'm not sure also, I mean, just like because of the fact that I don't have any way to read the actual thing that she took a screenshot of, I'm not sure if the picture that they show was supposed to be John Carr Burnett, or if she just thought that it was John Carr Burnett and it was more like it was, this is the guy who, or this just happens to be the picture that they use for talking about the 1870 census. And so, like, I honestly don't have a clue. I'm going to have to do more research, but this is something that I found out today, is that apparently I'm a brother. So, or part brother. I'm part brother.
One of us.
But anyway, so as all that aside, on Wednesday, early Wednesday morning, my wife woke up with a stomach flu. My middle son had it first, and he got it pretty bad over like a day-ish. It was less than a day, but it was like a good chunk of a day. Like it started overnight, and then it cleared up sometime during the day, and then it took a while for him to get his appetite back and everything. Then my daughter got it a couple days later, and actually it might have even been longer than that. Yeah, because I think it was my son got it like early Sunday morning, so we couldn't go to church, or at least my wife and him stayed home, and then the rest of us went to church. And then my daughter got it on Friday, the following Friday, and so not this past Friday, but the previous week. But hers, she threw up like twice, and then she was fine after that. So it was, and she's occasionally had times like that where she's just thrown up a tiny bit and everything, and I mean, she's thrown up a couple times and then she's been fine, so it's possible it wasn't even the stomach virus. Anyway, that all being said, so then early Wednesday morning, this past Wednesday, my wife wakes up early in the morning, has the stomach virus, and it's going throughout the night, off and on, miserable, of course. As a result, of course, I stayed home from the office because it's like, I don't want to spread this around. Plus, I don't know if I'm going to get it, or, if I'm going to get it, when I'm going to get it. And so, like, I don't want to put anyone through that. I've had the stomach virus before. I mean, I think I've had it maybe like twice. And the last time it was like full on was probably about 20 years ago, because I'm pretty sure it was 2006, when we were still in Alaska. And then since then, the worst I'd had is like half of a stomach virus, and it wasn't too bad. Usually it's just like a 24-hour bug. Usually, start at night, go for several hours, and then it'll stop, and basically back to normal, apart from maybe not being able to eat everything right away. But and so she got over it sometime Thursday, or no, I think by the end of the day Wednesday she was, or like midday Wednesday, she was basically fine. Just hadn't quite gotten her appetite back. Thursday she was starting to eat again. So then early Friday morning, I woke up with it. Or actually, no, that's not true. It started halfway Thursday evening, and it was the less in. I mean, the part that wasn't quite as bad to deal with. I'll just put it that way. I'm not going to go into any what's the word I'm looking for? Any of the gross details. I'll just put it that way. So but then Friday early in the morning, I started waking up with the other half and stomach issues, and was just like feeling miserable and was not sleeping well. Barely sleeping really. And then by the morning, like, I finally was able to get some sleep and slept for several hours, and I woke up and I was like, okay, I think I'm on the mend. But then, like, about midway through the day on Friday, it starts hitting me again, and I'm having a lot of issues throughout the day, and then overnight was honestly the worst I've ever experienced. And it turns out the big reason why it was so bad was because of the fact that I did not do a good job hydrating myself, and so I was just basically, like, constantly getting rid of fluids. And I mean, like, I had tried drinking some water before, but the problem was that I was drinking it too fast, and then I'd end up getting rid of it instead of drinking it slowly, or, getting like Gatorade or something, drinking it slowly to help rehydrate myself. And so my stomach was in so much pain. And I thought that the reason why my stomach was in pain was just like, okay, the bug is like really hitting me hard, and I just need to release stuff from my stomach in order to be able to take care of that. And I didn't know that it was just that I wasn't hydrated well enough. And so, like, it got to the point where it was like 2:30 Saturday morning. My wife, of course she hears me, and she calls the ER and, asks, says, this is what's going on with my husband. He has a stomach virus. And basically the nurse says, this is not uncommon. You just have to let it pass, which is, we know that in general with the stomach virus, but that basically, more likely than not, it's that I'm not hydrated enough, and that could be a reason why I'm in more pain. And so, yeah, all that being said, basically they basically said, it should be fine. You don't really need to bring him into the ER unless if he's concerned, you can bring him in, but you don't need to. And of course, I don't want to go to the ER because I don't want to put in that kind of cost if they're just basically going to tell me, oh, you're dehydrated, or it's it's going to pass. It's like, why waste the money on that visit when we could just take care of it? So, I think, let's see here. I don't remember exactly the timing for everything. I think we had some Gatorade or something available, and whatever the situation was, like, some of it's kind of a blur, but the point is that it got to a point where it's like, where in the morning, when it was late enough, my wife went and picked up some basically Pedialyte equivalent, because the Gatorade was not working for me as much. Actually, no, I'm wrong. It was Gatorade, because initially she had gotten me the night before a Gatorade that was, like, she had asked me which one I wanted, and I'm sorry, I'm getting everything mixed up. I had gotten her 2 Gatorades when she was having the issues. She only drank one, and so there was the other one. And so I had tried it, but the smell and the taste was so bad to me that I couldn't do more than like a sip. And so I didn't end up drinking that. And then she had gotten me on Friday. Yeah, on Friday she had gotten me the Gatorades that it's a flavor that I actually like. But ended up just I don't know. I guess the TLDL of this is that the stomach virus really sucked. The biggest problem was that I got myself dehydrated. And of course, it was the worst one I've ever experienced, even though it's been 20 years since I experienced anything even close to that. And I learned that it's important to hydrate, to do a better job hydrating, and that's just taking small sips, little bit at a time, of, especially things that have electrolytes and not just water, even though if I had just been drinking water in smaller sips, that probably would have helped as well. But yeah, it sucked. So Sunday, we ended up having to stay home from church. I mean, we had figured out ahead of time that was probably going to have to be the case, and we were able to get some people to sub for us on music, so that worked out just fine. But I was starting to feel better, I think, about midway through the day on Saturday. Not like completely, but better enough to where I wasn't in so much pain that I couldn't even look at a screen for very long. Like I could, when I was still in a lot of pain, it was like I could look at a screen for like a minute, and then I had to stop because it was not working. I couldn't focus on anything. Like I couldn't even play games most of the time that I was dealing with that because of the pain my stomach was in. And it wasn't really until I had gotten myself properly more hydrated that I started to actually feel like I could handle that, and then the pain subsided a bit. Didn't have much of an appetite, though, of course, for a while. And so I just... I think over the course of 3 days, I probably ate less calories than I would eat on a normal day if I maxed out my calories for my maximum allowable calories to still lose weight. So it's like, yeah, it was ridiculous. And my appetite's come back part of the way. It's not quite there yet, but I'm at least able to, like eat normal foods. I haven't had any problems and haven't had any digestive things on either area since Saturday. So, yeah. But that aside, Sunday we got some very good news. It's not something I can talk about right now, but I've already obviously told you about it, and it's just not something I can talk about on the show. And I will talk about it in the future, just not soon. It'll be a little bit. But because of that, I didn't end up getting to my videos, because it had originally been my plan to work on that on Saturday, but because of the fact that I was so miserable for a couple days and, had to miss work, and then had just basically like Saturday was really just a recovery day for me. I didn't end up getting anything done with that, but I did finally watch Dune, the one that came out in 2021, which I hadn't seen yet. I'd heard really good things about it from people who are like big fans of the book series, and that it was a very faithful adaptation. And I know there's a second part out already, which I ended up getting after the fact, but I actually really enjoyed it. It was a lot better than I thought it would be, mostly because like someone had told me there was some really graphic like stuff in there that I didn't want to be seeing, and I didn't know that until after I had already bought the movie. And so like it basically has been sitting on my shelf for like 2 years, and or no, I guess it was a little over a year. And then finally I'm just like, okay, if there's this scene near the beginning of the movie, I'll start the movie, and as soon as the scene starts, I'll skip it and then watch the rest of the movie, see what I think of it. Scene never came up, and then I found out from that person that what they had remembered was from a movie that they watched in the early 2000s. And so it's like, maybe they were thinking of the original Dune movie from 1984. That seems like the most likely thing. And then I saw that the original Dune was directed by David Lynch, who did like Twin Peaks and stuff, and his stuff got really out there. So it's like, okay, that would track pretty well. But yeah. So anyway, but the first Dune movie was very good, and my wife hasn't watched it yet. So I think she might actually be watching it. Yeah, she's watching it. She's starting it up tonight. And so we'll watch the second one together. Potentially this Friday. Not entirely sure. But we did finish up all of Psych, and including the 3 movies, which we watched one each night from Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So fantastic stuff. Fantastic series. And yeah, I don't think there's really anything else to say.
Nice. Definitely glad that everyone is feeling much better. I know that it's been a nasty round getting around everyone. One person has another person. But I'm definitely glad that you're all feeling better, and I'm definitely glad that you're feeling better, especially after, like you said, it being the worst it's been for you in a long time. So definitely glad you're recovering there. Regarding Dune, have they already announced a third movie, or is that still? Or
I am not
the second
sure.
one just like come out?
I think the second one came out in 2024, I want to say.
Okay.
And like when I was looking on IMDb, just because occasionally I was trying to figure out if I recognize someone from somewhere, it said 2026 for the third one, but that might have just been a placeholder date because, they do that sometimes with movies that are not yet released. So I don't know. But either way, I've heard the second one's also really good, and I'm looking forward to checking it out.
Okay. And to your knowledge, do you have an idea as far as how many movies there could be, or?
It's a pretty long series, and they're long books.
Oh.
So, I mean, those books came out back in the 80s. I think there's some of them that are more recent, but I know at least
it's still going on?
Well, no. I mean, I'm just saying that they're more recent than the 80s. I don't know exactly how recent. It could be the last novels were published in the 90s. I really don't know for sure. I know I looked it up at one time, and I do have audiobooks for some of them, but I haven't gotten around to listening to any of them yet. So I may end up doing that after we finish watching the movies, because I did really enjoy that first one. And also a friend of mine has told me about Dune, 20 years ago, and how great of a series it was. And so it's like, I've always been curious about it.
Might have to give it a watch sometime then.
Yep. All right. Well, all that other stuff out of the way. This brother wants to know what games you've been playing this week. Partial brother.
I heard recently that, or at least I heard that it had released early, as a matter of fact, a demo for Vampire Crawlers, and this is a dungeon crawler version of Vampire Survivors, and it's interesting to say the least. So essentially you are doing dungeon crawling, and it is kind of card based in a sense, whereas you do have a deck of abilities that are based on items and weapons that you normally would have in the regular Vampire Survivors game, and you can use that to either apply armor, have a certain character who has abilities that can buff certain cards that you have, or just have your normal cards that are for attack. And so you go through different waves, going through each floor in a dungeon, and you make progress. Now, and also, well, I guess not also, but it is, or at least does appear to be procedurally generated each floor, because when I started the game the first time, just to test it out, the first floor was different the first time around than when I played again later on, and that was different. So I think that it just changes up each time you play, and to that degree, it does seem to also have a degree of a roguelite element to it, just because there do seem to be some random chests that do spawn on the floors as well. But I think could be wrong, but I think whatever new cards you find, you get to keep, but I could be wrong. But I haven't played too much of the demo to tell for sure. But similar to Vampire Survivors, as you get coins, and this also would apply to other roguelites as well. If you get coins, there's a store you can go, you can buy weapons and more upgrades that are permanent, that you can go into new floors. I haven't gone through the first area, or all the way through the first area yet, just because you can't really so far heal yourself, so you just have to keep going and going until you end up dying. I've made it through the first floor. I think I made it through the second floor. And I made it just a little bit into the third floor, but there were these tougher enemies that just overwhelmed me at some point, and I just end up dying at that point. But overall, I think this is a pretty good spin-off of the base Vampire Survivors game. It's something that I probably wouldn't get day one, but it is something that I would get at some point, just because I'm not a big dungeon crawl person, but this is something that brings something that I'm very familiar with, which is the Vampire Survivors and I guess Survivors genre in general, and crosses over, and it gives a pretty interesting type of gameplay loop. So I'm like, yeah, this is interesting. I could play this, but it's not something I would just play day one. But yeah, so I did play that. But the main thing I've been playing, and because of our discussion last week, is Pokemon Fire Red. And I also went ahead, in light of your glowing recommendation, I picked Bulbasaur as my starter. And I must say, yeah, he definitely made the first gym very trivial, to say the least. Especially once I unlocked
Vine Whip.
What is it? Vine Whip? Yeah, that definitely made it trivial. I've only gotten... I haven't gotten too far into the game yet. I got through the first gym. I've gotten through a couple areas, and right now I'm in the Moon Mountain area right now. But so far, just like getting through that area, it's... even though I've been trying to also make sure that the other Pokemon that I have aren't completely under-leveled, it's really just been Pikachu and Bulbasaur who have just been used just because they're either Zubats or they're Geodudes, and it's just like, all right, Pikachu, Thunder Shock, all right, Bulbasaur, Vine Whip. You know, it's just like, okay, you two are just carrying me through this area right now. And unfortunately, like, the biggest pain in the neck has just been the random encounters, because it feels like I take 5 steps and then another wild Pokemon attacks me. I'm just like, all right, I'm pretty certain there's supposed to be an item that can help repel
it's just called
wild
repel.
Pokemon. Oh, go figure. But I'm not certain when you get that. But
I can't remember.
Do just want that at some point, just because while trying to find certain Pokemon or try to do some grinding is nice, if that's not my intention, it's just really trying to explore the area or just trying to make my way through, I really just don't feel like getting stopped every 5 steps. And I've been trying to remember if walking or running decreases the chance of a random encounter or not. But
yeah, I don't know, because
so far
I would think that running would increase the chance, but I don't know.
Yeah, I've been toying with it a bit, and sometimes it seems like one is better than the other, and sometimes it just doesn't seem like it makes too much of a difference. But I'm enjoying it so far. I'm not entirely concerned. I'm not entirely certain if I will stick with this. I do feel like it was just something to sort of take a slight break from Hades 2, and also just because we were talking about it, and I said, I've got a real... I've got an itch to play this game, so I said at least I will start this up and play it. But I mean, I might go back or I might see this through to the end, but at the very least, I do still want to get back to Hades 2 and finish that up. So this week I will be returning to that. But this at least was a good. This was good to play through in the meantime. But yeah, that is everything that I have played this past week.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny because obviously, like, I've never played Fire Red or Leaf Green. I've only ever played the original Gen 1 games. And I was thinking a lot about those this week. And I seriously have, just thought off and on, it would be fun to go back and play one of those. But then, like, looking at your gameplay, and I'm like, man, it really does look really good. I mean, like, I really like the updated models and everything, and the fact that they have actual, like, distinct colors, because you do have that in Pokemon Yellow, but it's much less so than Fire Red and Leaf Green, and so it's definitely something I was thinking about, and maybe even trying to see if I could just... I mean, it should be pretty easy to just put the ROMs on 3DS, and I think that would be a great place to play them, but I don't know. I'll kind of think about it, and more likely than not, if I want to play the games, I would probably just play the originals, because I do have a lot of nostalgia for them. And on that note, so one of the things I thought about, I can't remember which video it was I was watching. I think it was probably Gara talking about the Pokemon 30th anniversary stuff, and it just it brought back memories of playing Pokemon Red on an emulator. And I mean, of course, like, I originally played it on Game Boy and everything, but I also played it on an emulator on my old Palm Pilot.
What?
This is a Palm Pilot that I had back in my freshman and sophomore year of high school. That is when I first got it. I think it was probably my sophomore year, actually. And this thing, I could install a Game Boy emulator. And I mean, there was a few different games I played on there. One of which was Pokemon Red. And the thing is, it has just enough buttons to work, to have physical buttons for Game Boy. And so you have, left, right, and then you have up and down, and you have A and B. So you have all the buttons you need. So yeah, I thought about doing that. I basically just pulled it out yesterday, and I put some batteries in it and started it up, and was checking to see if I still had any of that information on the SD card that's in the system, which is a whopping 2 megabytes. Or no, 32 megabytes. Which was impressive, 20 years ago for having that much data on a little card, compared to the 1.4 megabytes on a quarter-inch floppy disk. Or, not quarter-inch. Yeah, whatever it is. Anyway, point is that the small square floppy disk, rather than the big huge ones that we had on the really old computers. So yeah, I used to play Pokemon on my Palm Pilot during the time that I didn't actually own a Game Boy anymore, and it was a way that I could get away with playing at school or playing on during class and that sort of thing. But I did mostly use this for classes, for taking notes, and I actually had a little thumb keyboard that I used that connected to it through the bottom, and it actually worked really well. I was really happy with it, although I wasn't using it with my thumbs. I was doing it with my fingers, but I got really good typing with it. And yeah, anyway. So back to the games I actually played, though. First of all, I will mention I don't have any footage recorded for it because I just kind of briefly tested them out. But I had mentioned having both the Persona 1 and 2 and Xenogears on my 3DS. And so I didn't really play any of it. It was more just kind of checking stuff out. Like with Persona 1, I wanted to check it out a little bit, get far enough to actually save in the game. And there's not really anything I can say about the game other than the fact that when you're not in the parts where you're like talking with people and stuff, when you're moving around in general, it's more dungeon crawler, moving around the environments. First person dungeon crawler kind of thing. But then with Xenogears, once again, I didn't play very much of it. It was really just for a few minutes, mostly because I was curious on how it looked on the Vita screen versus the 3DS screen, because the 3DS screen doesn't look the best. And of course there was a couple of like choppy spots on the 3DS when I was trying it out on there. But then I checked it out on Vita, since I already own it on there. I bought it back when the Vita store was supposed to be closing. And it looks much better on the Vita screen, and it runs better there too. So whenever I play it, I'll play it on Vita, which, I mean, that's fine with me. I just think it was cool to be able to get it on 3DS. I thought that was neat. But yeah, definitely looks much better on the Vita screen. Of course, the Vita screen is an OLED screen as well, which is probably half of why it looks better. But yeah. Yeah, with Persona 1, like, I did see that you can still buy all of those games, 1 and 2, on the Vita shop, the digital store, but they don't ever go discounted anymore. So it's like $20 each for the PSP games, and then 10, I think, for the PS1 versions of games. So it's like, I don't know. I think, like, if I really want to play it, like, if I get to a point, I play Persona 1 and I'm like, okay, I want to play Persona 2, then I would probably do that, you know. But otherwise, I don't think I care enough to spend $20 a piece on those. It's just not really worth it to me. Especially because I bet if I were to get them on the Steam Deck, run them through through PPSSPP for the PSP games, and actually, now that I think about it, all 3 of those are available on PSP. So you could actually run all of them through PPSSPP. Try to say that 5 times fast. And then I'd probably have a much better experience that way. So I might even do that whenever I'm in the mood to play those. But anyway. So yeah. So I didn't really touch those much at all. What I did touch was, first of all, I did try to play a little bit of Kena Bridge of Spirits. Unfortunately, the footage that I thought I recorded didn't actually record. And so the footage that's playing is just from last week. I basically just started trying to fight another boss, and this was like after my first, like Friday morning, when I was feeling like I was starting to recover and my head was clear enough that I felt like I could play something. But then, of course, later in the day, I ended up not feeling well, and I couldn't get past the boss I was trying to face. And so after that, I just never got back to it. I haven't tried going back to it since Friday, and I'm hoping to get back to it probably this weekend, because I do want to keep playing that and get through that boss, and then, you know, continue through the rest of the game. But we'll kind of play it by ear and see what happens. But yeah, so really didn't move the needle on that. And obviously being sick really reduced my game time significantly. But I did manage to play a little more Xenoblade Chronicles X on the Switch 2, and I actually recorded yesterday some off-screen handheld footage, so you'll get a chance to kind of see what it looks like with, you know, good camera settings and everything. I actually figured out, and you may have noticed this last week, I figured out a place where I could do the type of recording that I was doing originally on my kitchen counter in my room instead, because we have like this folding black table that we use for wrapping presents and that sort of thing when we have to do them in here. And so it's like, it's the perfect spot. I can have the lighting good to where I can have the camera, that we can get a good idea of how it looks on the screen. And like, this doesn't fully capture the amount of I mean, some of the oddities with the graphics because of the weird upscaling stuff, especially when you're standing still, like getting missions and whatnot. But even still, you know, the little bit I got to play, still enjoy that. You know, once again, I really didn't get to play very much. I think I probably played a bit Wednesday evening. Was the only time I really got much of any time with it. And then I played a little bit yesterday to record some footage, and that was about it. So that's about the extent of that. But what I did play most when once I started feeling better, was Ace Attorney Investigations, and I finished that up yesterday. So I finished up the first of the 2 games in the collection, and I technically, very briefly, I started the very, very beginning of the second game, but like I played like 2 minutes, so I didn't record any footage. And I don't know if I'm gonna start getting into it immediately or not, mostly just because I had so little gaming time compared to most weeks because of how sick I was. And so, yeah. But yeah, great game. I really enjoyed it. I like how both with this one and the first Apollo Justice game, they actually made it so that all the cases don't feel as disjointed, because even though all the cases follow each other and like they're treated as, oh, this happened previously, these ones, it's more like each case, like it seems a little disjointed initially, but then as you get further along, you're like, oh, this connects back to this and this, and this influenced how this happened, and the reason why this happened in the first place was because of this, and so on. So it's pretty cool. I mean, it's not like deep or anything like that sort of thing, but it's still pretty cool. I think it's a nice touch because it makes the cases more interesting from that standpoint. And so yeah, I did enjoy it overall. This time I actually recorded docked footage, so directly from the Switch, and it actually stretched surprisingly well on my 1440p screen. Like, it actually looked really good. It didn't feel like it was a downgrade in terms of, I mean, sometimes when you're playing, these Switch 1 games off of a Switch 1 onto a higher resolution screen, it feels, I mean, you can notice like it's got some flaws because it's not intended for that high of a resolution screen, but this game is not one of those. So I was pleasantly surprised from that standpoint, but I played the majority of the rest of it in handheld on Switch OLED. But one of the games that ended up just kind of, I don't know what exactly caused me to get the itch to play it, but I decided to, well, let me back up slightly. I got an itch to play Project Cross Zone, and I own Project Cross Zone 2 because I heard that one was better than the first one, and I had only ever played the demo of the first one, but I kind of want to play the first one before I play the second one, because even if the first one isn't as good, then I can appreciate the quality of life improvements in the second one that much more. And now that I'm also, more familiar with like Ace Attorney series, for example, which I know some of the characters are featured in the second game, but I can't remember if they were in the first game. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. But I ended up just downloading Project Cross Zone on the 3DS, and I went ahead and played just a little bit. I'm not really like planning to get into this game. It was more just, I kind of wanted to mess with it a little bit because the hack and slash stuff is pretty fun. And, I felt like doing it, so I did. And I recorded some footage, and I've only done like some of the prologue stuff. That's really all I've done. And I don't know if I'm really going to be playing this much at all, but if I decide to, I have both games on 3DS, and it's just kind of fun. That's really all there is to it. But the last game that I played was more of a surprise to me today, finding out that it got Steam Deck verified, when previously I was not really impressed with how it ran on Steam Deck. I mean, it was okay, but I put it down pretty quickly. And that's Gotham Knights. Today a video came up that apparently it got Steam Deck verified. And of course, Steam Deck verified doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot most of the time. But consider the fact that it wasn't Steam Deck verified before, and I think for good reason, because it was like 30 frames per second with some dips, and basically didn't get above that, didn't look very good, all that stuff. I checked out the video of someone playing it, and I was like, okay, that actually doesn't look too bad. That actually looks quite a lot better and seems to run pretty well even without lossless scaling. And so I went ahead and reinstalled it on my Steam Deck, and I'm really pleasantly surprised. It actually runs basically as well as Spider-Man Remastered and Spider-Man Miles Morales. Now, granted, those ones I ran without any upscaling, mostly because I found that the upscaling didn't make a difference in the performance. And I will say also, I didn't actually check, I didn't try running it natively to see how it runs natively compared to how it runs with upscaling, but I did run it with upscaling with XeSS balanced, and it looks pretty good. I capped it at 40 FPS both in-game and on the Steam Deck, and it seems to maintain that 40 frames per second really well. Like, I tested it. The footage here covers outdoor, it covers riding the motorcycle, it covers indoor. I don't know how much of it you'll actually get to see within this, depending on how long we talk about it, but yeah, it was pretty consistent all across the board. The only time I had any real issues with it, getting some weird, really bad hiccups, was when I was playing from desktop mode. And the only reason I did that was just because I had gone to desktop mode to export some of the video footage and then decided, oh, I better go back and record some motorcycle footage. And then when I was trying to do the motorcycle in desktop mode, then it was stuttering really badly. But then I switched back to game mode, and then it wasn't stuttering. So, yeah, but I'm pretty impressed with it. I was definitely a bit rusty, like, initially, and the character I had last played as was Red Hood, because he was the last one I got his gliding ability equivalent, which his is like he makes spirit platforms in the air that he can jump on. And I think that's definitely my least favorite of the different options that are available. But once I started to, like, remember the controls again, and then remembered, oh yeah, that's right, I have a bat cycle I can use. Or, well, I guess it's not bat cycle, but whatever the motorcycle is for him. I guess maybe it is a bat cycle, because he's part of the Gotham Knights. But nevertheless, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily planning to play this a bunch. But I will say, where before I was basically like, I probably won't play it on the Steam Deck because it doesn't run well enough for my taste, especially because I can definitely run it better on my laptop. Now that I have had the laptop for a while, and I don't really like to have to carry it around with me if I'm not using it for, for like editing the podcast and that sort of thing, or if I'm not just playing something that's way too demanding, I would happily play this game at 40 frames per second on Steam Deck. Now, obviously, playing on my desktop is way better, but if I don't have the ability to play on my desktop, because either I'm not at home, or I am not, or like I have my work computer plugged in and I don't want to swap out all the cables during my break, I can just pull out my Steam Deck and I can boot it up and continue where I left off. It even, reconnects me to the online servers if I want to. And I can't remember if I ever mentioned that at one point someone joined me randomly for co-op that I didn't know. It was just a random person that joined me, and it was like, actually was pretty seamless. But yeah, so people could randomly join me if they wanted to. But yeah, I'm really impressed with the fact that they actually fixed this game. It's still nowhere near as good as the Arkham games because of the fact that it's lacking the Metroidvania elements. And, of course, they put some modern politics stuff in there. Thankfully, it's not like Orange Man Bad or anything like that, but it's still stuff in there that I just rolled my eyes at in the way my dad does, which is like this, and those who are listening that knew my father will know exactly what I just did. In spite of that, I mean, I still think the game otherwise is pretty fun. Like the actual combat is good, and obviously, like, I'm early in the game. I haven't really done much in terms of story because I mostly just wanted to get everybody's glide ability or glide equivalent to make traversal easier around the city, and then it'll probably be something like I boot up occasionally. I don't know how much it's going to be because right now it's more heavily like when I want something that I want to like really focus on, it's going to be Kena Bridge of Spirits. As soon as I finish that, because it's not a very long game, then I'm hoping to get back to Death Stranding and focus on getting the remaining achievements and then Death Stranding 2. And then, of course, if I just want something story that doesn't require reflexes and all that, then I'm working on the Ace Attorney titles and have the next game in the investigation series that I barely started. So, but yeah. I don't think there's really anything else I have to say. That's everything.
Okay. So for Gotham Knights, you mentioned now about someone randomly joining in. So is the game set automatically to be, I guess, in co-op mode essentially, or something that you can just manually turn on and turn off at any time?
Yeah, you can turn it on or off as you please. I had turned it on at one. I mean, I like either it was on by default, or I just never turned it back off after the one time that someone joined me, and I forgot that it was even on. And I mean, like, I haven't had anyone join me since that one time months ago. When I was playing it more consistently. But yeah.
And this is probably something that has been answered or addressed at some point. But does the game happen to have split screen co-op, or is it just online only?
No, definitely online only.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that might be the case.
I mean, remember, it's 30 frames per second on consoles.
Yeah. Having to render everything twice. Yeah. Gonna fry everything.
Yeah.
Okay. And then going back a bit, so with the Ace Attorney games, so you just have the one game left in the investigations game, and then after that, which one are you going to get into?
I think the next one is Ace Attorney versus I forgot his name again already.
Professor Layton?
Yes. I believe that's the next one. It's either that or it's the next Apollo Justice game. It's one of those two.
Okay, and so then about how far into the series are you right now then? Because I mean, you seem
well.
Like
let's see here.
Through.
I know I have one more investigations game. Then I have 2 more Apollo Justice games, which I think those ones have Apollo Justice and Phoenix Wright, whereas the first one was just Apollo Justice. I mean, Phoenix Wright was in the game, but he wasn't a playable character. And then I have the Professor Layton versus Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright, or Ace Attorney versus whatever it is. You know what I'm saying. And then I have the Ace Attorney Chronicles games, which is there's 2 of those in the collection. So 7 more games.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Plenty of games.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I'll necessarily play all of them this year, but I mean, I've been on more of a roll with it, and I overall enjoy them. It's just kind of like I like the characters, I like the humor, and once I got past the reality that this is not in any way an accurate representation of the U.S. justice system, and I just have to be okay with that, then I just had to have a good time with it. And it's a good kind of a good game to play when I don't want to worry about reflexes.
Okay, no. Yeah. I was just thinking. Let's say, let me know how it happens. But I remember you're playing on the Switch. So I'll say, let me know how the games look with the 3D effect, but that doesn't have it since it's not the 3DS you're playing on right now.
Right. Yeah. Not with the investigations games. The rest of them are all on 3DS. Well, all but the Ace Attorney Chronicles games, which are also on Switch. But those will be the last 2 I play. At least I'm pretty sure they're the last 2. There might be some. Actually, it might be different than that. It might actually be like, I think there might be one of the Ace Attorney Chronicles games, and then there's another regular Ace Attorney game, like the last one with Apollo Justice and Phoenix Wright, and then the last Chronicles game, I believe.
Okay. going back to what was that I had here? Oh yes. So I was partially curious about the it's something that I just had a question about. So in light of what Atlas has been doing with the more recent Persona games, do you think it would be too far-fetched, or do you think it's something that would be as high of a priority to eventually maybe have them remake the first two Persona games? Because I mean, considering the fact that while they might not be as popular as 3, 4, and 5, do you think remaking them would possibly put more eyes on those entries, or do you think that's just something that they could just leave behind because it was like, we were doing something here, and people, if they want to have that Shin Megami Tensei atmosphere, they'll play Shin Megami Tensei, but if they play Persona, they have expectations for what a Persona game would entail, so we just won't bother touching them. Do you think that that's something they could at some point do? Because I mean, they haven't ported that outside of like the PlayStation collection of consoles, have they?
Yeah, just PS1 and PSP are the only places those games exist. At least, officially.
Right. Okay.
So my opinion on this is that the way we'll know whether or not they're going to do anything with those, at least in terms of remaking, is after they release Persona 4 Revival. While I still think Persona 6 is going to be revealed, I also would not be surprised if it ends up being that they do Persona 4 Revival and then Persona 6 is still years down the road. And then after they do Persona 4 Revival, that's really going to be the key indicator of, what direction they're going. Because if they are like, okay, here's Persona 4 Revival and reveal Persona 6 around the same time or whatever and say, we have both of these. Or they reveal Persona 4 Revival and then the next game they reveal will be an indicator of which direction they're going. Because if it's Persona 4 Revival and then Persona 6, then it's going to be a while before we see anything else from Persona 1 and 2, unless they do collections, like remasters, which they very well could, especially since they've already done, the previous games. But if we see if they don't reveal Persona 6, then I could see them being like, okay, now we're going to do remakes of 1 and 2. And then Persona 6 is just going to be down the road, and who knows when it'll actually come out. I wouldn't mind seeing them do some sort of remake, but personally, I would be perfectly fine with them just doing a remaster and then moving forward. Because I don't really want them to change what those games were, necessarily. I mean, if they want to make some quality of life improvements to it, sure, that would be great. But I think that overall, it should remain essentially what it was. At least as an overall package. Now, I do think that there are potential ways that they could maintain what those games were without that they could update those games to make them more in line in terms of an experience with the more modern games, while still maintaining the older stuff. Essentially, in just that they would update the visuals, have all 3D models, no longer have the dungeon crawling first person thing, but then also maintain the same mood and everything else that the games originally had. Because you look at the Shin Megami Tensei games, especially Shin Megami Tensei 5, which is the first one that's like fully 3D all across the board and isn't just like in certain sections like 4 was. That one really showed that it was possible to have that very dark, serious tone, while still having the better art style and everything else. And they don't necessarily, I wouldn't expect them to take Persona 1 and 2 and make it so that suddenly they have like collectibles and stuff in the open world. I mean, having like an open world or anything like Persona or like Shin Megami Tensei 5, but I do think that they could update it to make it so that you have all of what made those games what they were, but at the same time updating them so that you get kind of the best of both worlds, which is what I think they did with Persona 3 Reload. I think that it was a really good example of one that had the best of both worlds because it had all of the quality of life improvements of 5 specifically, but then it at the same time maintained essentially everything else about 3. So it was just like all across the board, it was great. I still think it's the weakest of those 3 games, at least in terms of it's my least favorite of those 3 games, I should say. But the actual presentation of it, the quality of life improvements they made to it were so good that it definitely took the game far above what it was before, while at the same time still maintaining the feel of the original game in many ways. So I don't know if that explains or answers your question, but
No, that definitely answered it. And yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense. I mean, I definitely hadn't forgotten about the Persona 4 remake, but I did forget about the fact that they have already mentioned about Persona 6. So,
well, they haven't.
Considering the fact that's going to be brand new.
They haven't mentioned anything about Persona 6 yet.
Right, they haven't announced it, but it's pretty certain that it's
right. But the question, I mean, like, even though I believe it's coming, I also honestly don't know. I think this year will be the real test to see of whether it's something that they actually have made a lot of progress on, or if it's something that they're just going to, they either haven't made progress on or have decided to push back so that they can bring back some of the older stuff or whatever. And because they may not want to take the spotlight off of Persona 4 Revival unless it's going to be longer before that comes out than it will be before Persona 6 comes out.
true.
All right.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Let me see. One question I had. Then just one question I actually did have, which actually had to do with the Palm Pilot. So, was Pokemon Red the only game you play on there? And also, what was the general performance of games on playing one there?
It was bad.
I was just really curious.
But I wasn't picky. I mean, it's like I was, 15, 16, or no, I was like 14, 15 years old. So I was not picky. And it was like the only handheld device I had at the time. Because I didn't really like get a Game Boy that I could actually keep for myself until a Game Boy or Game Boy Color or Advance or anything like that, until I was like, I think I got a Game Boy Pocket when I was 16, right before we moved to Alaska. But apart from that, I had, been able to use other people's devices, but I just didn't have my own. Yeah. So I wasn't super picky, and I mean, really, Pokemon, it didn't matter. It's not a game that you need to have high frame rates. Now, yes, I obviously, given the choice between the two, nostalgia aside, I would always choose the better frame rate nowadays. But for nostalgia's sake, I would be okay with playing it that way, just because, or at least playing it for that way for a little bit, just because of the fact that it does bring back memories, and I do still intend to do that. I'm hoping by this time next week I'll have it installed on there, because I looked it up, and there's still emulators you can get for it, even ones that came out as recent 2023. So it's like, hey, that's cool. We'll see if performance is any better now than it was 25 years ago. but it's certainly possible. It could be a little bit better. You know, someone figured out how to better utilize the power there, because I don't believe for a second that the Palm Pilot is less powerful than a Game Boy. I don't believe that at all. I don't think there's any chance that that's actually the case, especially because the original Game Boy, which is, you know, the same hardware that was essentially there for even through the Game Boy Color. I mean, the Game Boy Color was, I think, maybe slightly more powerful, but just barely. I mean, that was, you know, the original Game Boy was, I think, 1989. So, I mean, it's really old hardware, and this Palm Pilot, it's a heck of a lot more compact, but it's not really that much more compact than the original Game Boy, or than like the Game Boy Pocket. And it does a heck of a lot more, or at least can do a heck of a lot more. By the base apps are really basic. You really don't have much on here, but you can get quite a few different things on here. I used to have some different stuff. I think I even did some web browsing on this. I'd be really curious about trying to do web browsing using modern internet on this thing. Would be very interesting. But actually, you know, now that I think about it, I would not have ever used internet on here, because this wouldn't have any sort of Wi-Fi chip in it, because that was before Wi-Fi was a thing. And furthermore, the reality is that I was still on dial-up back then. So, yeah.
I think the ultimate test would just be well, I mean, I feel like they definitely have found a way to do this, but can it run Doom? Like, I feel like that's something that would have been, since they put Doom on everything essentially at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine it would run well, but hey, if you know the enemy placements well enough, you probably could manage with just, you know, 2 buttons and then enough to, you know, move around. I would think, theoretically. Maybe not, because let's see here, because you need a button to shoot, and you need a button to jump. I guess you need a button to interact. So maybe not. I don't know. I'd be curious. I'll have to look that up too. That's a good idea. I'll have to check that out.
All right, that's everything from me then.
All right, sounds good. Well, let's get into the news, and this week we only have 2 topics, but they are big ones. So I think, first of all, before we get into this whole question of whether or not Sony is going to bring PC ports anymore going forward, you know, with these rumors that have come out, let's talk about Bluepoint and just revisit our discussion from last week, because since last week we got some more information. Some interviews that were done with 4 different employees, or former employees from Bluepoint, regarding everything that happened with them, essentially what's happened with them since they shipped Demon Souls. So, I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to read everything here. So buckle in a little bit, and then I'll let you give all your thoughts. Or at least I guess I'll more just kind of try to summarize. So, let's do. So this is from Twitter user Green Zone Bytes. I don't know really anything about this user specifically, so you could take it with a grain of salt. But all of this sounds pretty realistic. I want to say this is that the username is not necessarily indicative of anything. I don't know. Anyway, doesn't matter. This is what the 4 different employees from Bluepoint, and actually I don't think these are former employees, because well, now they're former employees, but they weren't as of the time that this was reported. So, going through, and at the end of 2020, Bluepoint shipped Demon Souls and started talking with Sony about being acquired and working on more original projects. Sony did not think the remakes or remasters made enough money, and those remasters being, of course, Shadow of the Colossus and Demon Souls, and some people within Bluepoint and Sony wanted to branch out. All they heard was that the Shadow of the Colossus remake lost money, but it was assumed it would. But Shuhei Yoshida wanted to preserve the game. Understandable. Shadow of the Colossus remake biggest. Well, this is not really that important. There were conversations about doing add-on content to the remakes to help with funding into original content and grow design department. It was assumed that in the studio, Bluepoint would be remaking Bloodborne after Demon's Souls. Bluepoint had a design department of only 1 to 2 people, but it was not sufficient for a full project. So 2021 rolls around, early 2021. After Demon's Souls, studio staff assumed they would work on Bloodborne and started to prepare to. However, they did not get the green light due to internal politics of Bloodborne involving a fragile relationship with FromSoft, Sony, and the original IP. Sources do not think Bloodborne remake will ever be made due to politics. And one thing I just want to add to this from stuff we've heard in the past is that it is a very strong, what I've heard, and I don't remember the specific sources, so I could be wrong on this, but my understanding is that essentially the whole reason why it is that Demon's Souls never got a sequel was because Miyazaki did not have a good time working with Sony on Demon's Souls, and that's the reason why Dark Souls even came in the first place. So Demon's Souls never got its sequel. Dark Souls became a thing. And in the case of, and so it was a while before, Bloodborne came out. That was many years later. And then after Bloodborne came out, they had more issues. And then since then, we've also, heard stuff about how Bloodborne had, kind of a complicated thing because Miyazaki would love to see it on other platforms, but Sony didn't want it on other platforms. And so you had that issue. So you had an issue with the IPs there. But then on top of that, from what I've also heard more recently, is that FromSoft was not a fan of the Demon's Souls remake. That essentially it was not faithful enough to the original game. And I've heard from a lot of people who are, big fans of the original game that have said that the original game is better than the remake. And I don't have an opinion on it one way or another because I haven't played the remake and I haven't played enough of the original to be able to give an opinion. So I'm not even getting into that there. But this could be the internal politics because of that, or that they're referring to. So getting back to the post here. Bloodborne was pulled from the table and Bluepoint had no project. So Bluepoint was assigned to help with God of War Ragnarok support due to Sony Santa Monica needing some help and a combination of other factors. Jim Ryan was pushing live service hard, and Sony had a desire to explore making God of War into an Assassin's Creed style franchise. The franchise would explore different mythologies and characters. Bluepoint was not allowed to make a game with Kratos, as neither Sony Santa Monica nor Sony trusted Bluepoint with that, and because it would be too expensive. So, September 30th, 2021, Bluepoint was purchased by Sony. Bluepoint, after being acquired, they were tasked with coming up with an original project in the God of War universe. The catch was they needed to stretch the content, but Bluepoint employees did not know at the time it was a live service game. They stated, a gamble was made by convincing Sony to buy us instead of looking for funding elsewhere. So essentially it was Bluepoint convinced Sony to buy them rather than it being Sony who made the decision entirely on their own. So that's certainly a bit of a red flag. But obviously, now that Bluepoint's closed, we see where that went. So, but after the acquisition, there was a culture change within Bluepoint. 2022 rolls around. Prototyping begins for Demon's Souls meets God of War, which is their concept project, also called CP13. Bluepoint staff was not told initially that the game was a live service game. They still had a minimal design team, just the 1 to 2 people, and they did not have a game director for the project, but were promised one on loan from Sony Santa Monica, and a couple of designers once Ragnarok was shipped. So, end of 2022, the Sony Santa Monica game director and designers joined the team at Bluepoint. A lot of time was spent prototyping, but Sony Santa Monica and Bluepoint just really didn't mesh well because they were not, or I'm sorry, Santa Monica Studio did not mesh well with Bluepoint because they were not familiar with Bluepoint's engine. And then, of course, fully remote work due to COVID and hiring freezes at Sony. Soon after Santa Monica Studios folks arrived, Bluepoint staff learned the game they were having to make was a live service game, and they needed to work with what they had. Internal issues began to arise, and the ones on board with live service were the head shed at Santa Monica Studios, Sony, and Bluepoint. It was unclear whether Bluepoint leadership believed in the project or was just doing their best to salvage morale. About 75% of staff employees, according to sources, were against this move and pushed back against making a live service. After deadlines were not hit, internal strife from employees, the project was canceled by Sony in early 2025. So 2025, Bluepoint begins pitching projects to Sony. They pitched a Jak and Daxter remake, Resistance remake, Shadow of Colossus remaster, bringing the game to PS5, updating graphics, adding 4 to 6 bosses that had been that had not come from. That it says with several pulled from the original PS2 content. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Could be interpreted a couple different ways. The Bloodborne remake was again pitched. A small portion of the team worked on it for 2 to 3 months, but Sony pulled the plug. It was never officially greenlit, but they were deep in negotiations, and Bluepoint thought they would make it. 2 new IPs, and that's also what they pitched. And they worked on some small pitches, all under the CP13 folder. And then codename Black Fang CP14 was pitched. Black Fang was a Ghost of Tsushima spin-off that Sony liked. Sony gave them 5 to 6 months to prototype it until the end of March 2026 to prove that they could make it. Employees felt it was going okay, even though it was never officially greenlit, and were on track to hit the deadline. But employees found out on February 19th that they were being shut down, and the Project Black Fang was canceled. Their last day was Monday, March 2nd, 2026. Final notes here. It is worth noting that Bluepoint did use contractors. However, the majority of the people staying at the studio from that Shadow project stayed at the studio from the beginning of the Shadow project until shuttering. About 40 employees have been there the entire time, with the rest being contractors. This obviously has fluctuated with retirements, deaths, and turnovers. According to all sources, people stayed at Bluepoint and wanted to continue to stay there. So yeah, that is a lot of information. And I thought, rather than trying to give the bullet points, I thought it was really important to get all of the different contexts here, because this is obviously not even necessarily the whole story, but this is still essentially covering all the major stuff that happened in that time frame. And since this person spoke to 4 different employees, it seems very likely that this is all legitimate information. So what are your thoughts?
Wow. There's definitely a whole lot to digest here, and it's really interesting seeing how things went. On one hand, with the earlier stuff, I can understand why there were some issues, but as far as the later stuff, I really feel like Sony is to blame for a lot of that stuff. I mean, for the earlier stuff, you know, especially with when they were pitching a Bloodborne remaster, remake, and whatnot, and also with the God of War spin-off as well. I can understand, Sony not wanting to maybe necessarily push for those games since that was before they acquired Bluepoint and having to worry about licensing and stuff like that. I can understand why they didn't necessarily greenlight that one. For Bloodborne, maybe I can understand that as well. I mean, I know despite the fact that as was stated that there has been internal conflict going on between Miyazaki and Sony regarding that. Miyazaki has stated that if a Bloodborne remake is going to be made, the ball is in Sony's court. So since they own the IP overall, they have to be the ones who want to get the ball rolling. So that really is, Sony saying no to the remake. That I would say is on them. But at the same time, I don't know if. I mean, I personally, from what I can tell, it looks like Demon Souls remake did well. I mean, maybe it might not have been doing the numbers that Sony wanted, but it seemed to do pretty decently from what I could tell. But I guess maybe it was doing well enough where they would say, okay, maybe because of that, we won't go and do Bloodborne remake. I mean, that's just a guess on my hand. But at the same time, you do have to consider the fact that you are only catering to one platform, and considering the fact that Elden Ring did solid numbers largely because it was a multi-plat title, so maybe that's why it wasn't doing as well as you have liked. Who knows? I mean, the one thing also to take consideration is that when Demon Souls did come out, early on in the PS5 release, which is crazy to think about that it's been at least 9 years ago, or coming up on that, because something like that. But that was roughly around when there were shortage issues and whatnot, and so it was kind of hard to get a PS5 in those days. So,
oh, you meant 5 years ago?
Oh yeah, 5 years ago. Yeah,
like 9 years ago. Wait,
no. I was I don't know why I'm even 5 years ago. Like that was a time when getting a lot of stuff tech wise was hard. So I can understand why sales might not have been that great since people were having a hard time just getting a PS5 in general. And that was a PS5 exclusive. So I can understand that sales weren't doing so well, but at the same time, I don't think that would have been a reason to just say, all right, we're not doing Bloodborne remake. And as far as like I do feel though strongly that Sony did really put Bluepoint in a bad position, because of course they've had the whole initiative trying to push live service games, and they've been trying to make as many live service games as possible, and they've even at this point, I mean, they haven't done to a whole lot of them, but they've canceled multiple live service titles that have been in development or planned. And of course they had Concord, and we all know how that turned out.
Yeah.
But the fact that they tried to push live service a live service title on a company that is known for making remasters and remakes it did not make sense to me at all.
Yeah.
And I really think that the Jak and Daxter Resistance, I think that would have been something that would have been fine to do. I think if Sony was worried about not spending too much money or investing too much, I think those titles would have been safe to work on. That's not something that you probably would need that much money to work on. I mean, even maybe doing Shadow of Colossus as well, I would say that it's probably safe to do that too. I mean, hey, they probably could have done something like fully remastering, like Gravity Rush 2 or something like that. You know, that's something they could have done, but Sony said, no, live service, guys. And I definitely do believe that the people who are working there, as was stated, or at least the 75% of them, were not pleased with the way things were heading. And so I definitely can understand their frustration on that end. It is a shame, though, that because Black Fang, you know, sounds appealing, and a shame that they were, supposedly close to meeting their deadline, and then right before they reach the finish line, they just get thrown out of the race altogether.
Yeah.
Which ultimately just sucks. And I think all in all, it's really just Bluepoint had been dealt a bad hand just because whatever they were trying to do or try to get approved, Sony just was not working with them. And then when they were trying to, meet where Sony wasn't working on Sony's chasing something that they shouldn't be chasing, which is just live service. Like, I understand they want to have that special revenue stream. They want to try to catch that same lightning that Helldivers 2 had. But at the same time, they just have to understand they have to work on their strengths. And single player titles, I would say, are their strengths. Like, ever since Sony started leaning into that, multiplayer titles just haven't been a strong point for them. And I don't fault them for trying to get into that space, but they're really they're focusing too hard on that, I think. And if they want to have multiplayer, I don't have an issue with that, but I think the best thing for them to do would be to have a single player game, but then just try to focus the multiplayer aspect as an add-on for that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I think would be the best thing to do. Try to work on that aspect first, and then once they understand how to properly tap into that, then go ahead and try to make a live service game. But for right now, it's just not doing well for them. And we'll definitely have to see what happens with Marathon when that releases, because that's their next multiplayer gambit. And considering the fact that another live service game, High Guard, essentially became Concord 2, they have to really make sure they lock in for this one. Otherwise, this could end up being Concord 3. But yeah, getting back to Bluepoint, though, I think Bluepoint, while sure they haven't officially done anything in a good while, I still think, like I said last week, I don't think it's necessarily their fault. I think there's something they could have done if Sony just let them do what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, some people might not like the change in art direction that they did for Demon's Souls, but as far as the gameplay goes, people definitely still enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
And even if, like I said, even if they didn't do Bloodborne, let them do something with the other titles. Jak and Daxter, the original Ratchet and Clank games, Resistance, even Nathan, original Nathan Drake trilogy. Like that.
They were actually the ones who did the Nathan Drake collection on PS4. They ported it from PS3 to PS4 and made it 60 frames per second.
Yeah, and I think that another thing is why? Because obviously they're not the ones working on this, but why weren't they involved with the God of War trilogy remake? I mean, I feel like they could have been helping out with that. They could have been working on that, and yet Sony had them working on live service stuff. So I don't know. I think that's all that I have right now, but something's gonna pop into my head eventually at some point again. So I'll let you go ahead and share your thoughts.
Yeah, there really is just so much to unpack here. And I want to say, first of all, like, I feel like this is kind of it wasn't just Sony, it wasn't just Bluepoint, but I do think that probably more of the blame could be put on Sony. I mean, and I'm not trying to be like, I don't want it to seem like, oh, I'm hating on Sony, but just looking at what we see here of what happened, at least according to them, and the fact that you get it from 4 different people and their stories all match says it's probably what happened, unless they just coordinated to make all this stuff up. But all this sounds very believable, and it's not something, I mean, nothing sounds like ridiculous in terms of, oh, Sony was beating us and sexually harassing us or anything like that. It's like, no, that, they're not making any like outrageous claims. They're just saying these are the things that came up and this is how it happened. And so that's what makes it so believable, because it's not so outrageous. I don't think the idea of a Bloodborne remake was ever a good idea. I think it would make way more sense to just remaster the game. I mean, we look at how Bloodborne looks emulated on PC, even on a decent PC, and what modders have been able to do with it and everything. And it's like, whether you do visual changes to it or not, I mean, the game is still a gorgeous game. It really is. It is a fantastic looking game. And all you had to do was let them bump it up to 4K and 60 frames per second, or, at least upscale to 4K, whatever. Just make it 60 frames per second, do some upscaling. People would have been very happy with that. It would have been a relatively cheap thing for them to do, and it would have made them a ton of money. Then you look at all the other potential remasters they could have done. Different IPs. PS4, even if you just went with PS4, there's plenty there that they could work on. If they went back to PS3 or PS2, that increases the number of things they could have worked on. But instead, Sony wanted them to come up with new things. And I mean, I get it, because of the fact that a lot of the PlayStation audience is much less interested in old games, and they want the prettiest, shiniest graphics possible. I can understand from that perspective. But the problem is that they're just leaving so much money on the table by not doing anything with all these old IPs. With these games that are not even that old and that really wouldn't take anywhere near that much work, that Bluepoint could have easily done without having to have necessarily more staff. They could have just had them do these things, bring them forward, even if they only brought them to PlayStation, even if they didn't bring them to PC. I mean, if they brought them to PC, it'd be a whole different ballgame. But just simply bringing them forward to PS5 alone could make a big difference. Now, I do think it would make, obviously, a much bigger difference if they brought them over to PC. That would have been the biggest thing. I mean, looking at like the Shadow of the Colossus and Demon Souls remakes, those are two remakes that, yes, like Shadow of the Colossus, I don't think anyone thought it was going to make money. I mean, from what it said in there, they were expecting it to lose money, but they wanted to preserve it. And even the most controversial change was actually from the director of the original game. He wanted it done that way. But those games, it's like, I literally just said, I put in my notes, but Shadow of the Colossus remake lost money. Demon Souls did not make enough money. And my response is, PC says, hello. I mean, it's like, PC, as I've said in the past, is full of weebs. Love Japanese games. Love Japan studio games. And those are both originally Japan studio games. Yes, of course, probably PC gamers would rather just have the original versions of the games, or the the original remaster of Shadow of the Colossus, and then have the original Demon Souls. But you brought those forward, guaranteed day one both games would sell better on PC than they sold on any of the PlayStation consoles previously. In fact, I would say Demon Souls Remake would sell more on PC for just the remake than the original Demon Souls and the remake sold on PS3 and PS5 combined. Guaranteed. Potentially even day one. Shadow of the Colossus remake, I would say day one guaranteed would have sold more than all previous copies of Shadow of the Colossus. Period. It would have sold more day one on PC than all the other copies sold across all PlayStation consoles. And you had the original on PS2, then you had the remaster on PS3, and then you had the remake on PS4. I guarantee you it would have sold more day one for the remake on PC than all three of those sold on PS2, PS3, PS4. But that's not what Sony wanted to do. And it's like, I think Bluepoint had some good ideas, and some of them are like less, I don't know, I actually thought the idea of God of War combined with Demon Souls was very interesting to me. Like, that could have been really interesting. Like, I would have been very interested in that. And especially because of the fact that it would just be in the God of War universe, it wouldn't actually be Kratos, all that. But you could still be like, okay, you could make this a really good game. And I love the concept. I think that's a really cool idea. And that would have interested me for sure. Now, I wouldn't have bought a PS5 for it. But if they wanted to put it on PS5 and PC, why not? Especially because by that point, they had already put multiple games on PC. So it's like, why not? And then, like the Codename Black Fang, the Ghost of Tsushima spinoff that Sony liked and that they had been working on right until they got shut down. That one, I feel like half the reason they ended up doing it was because of the fact that it kind of stepped on the toes of Ghost of Yotei too much. And because there was backlash to Ghost of Yotei because of stuff having to do with the actress who played the character and the stuff that they did with the story. I have a feeling that's part of it. I don't know for sure, obviously, but it wouldn't surprise me in the least if that is what the real reason why it got shut down, or why they ultimately didn't move forward with the project. Because if they had wanted to move forward with the project, they would have kept the studio open. But they obviously didn't care enough. They just decided to cut their losses and cut it off there. Let's see here. Let me just go back to looking at some. Okay, so this obsession with God of War, Horizon, and The Last of Us. Those are like the three major franchises that they're focused on. And I mean, obviously they have a couple other things. They have Helldivers, and they have the Ghost, the Ghost series, and they have the Marvel games. And I mean, they do have Ratchet and Clank. So it's not like they don't have any other IPs. But the ones that have been milked the most by far are Last of Us, God of War, and Horizon. And of course, I mean, in the case of like God of War, it's only just starting to really get more milked. But that and the fact that they were so obsessed with trying to get these live service games. To me, all of this is definitely an issue of leadership. And I realize that a lot of this was Jim Ryan era. Jim Ryan's already gone. And so some of that had to do with that side of things. But it just seems so much of this is an issue of Sony not being willing to provide them with what they needed, even after acquiring them. Of course, the the difference in culture and all of that is obviously an issue from that standpoint. And I'm not saying necessarily that I think everything that Bluepoint did was perfect. Obviously, it wasn't. Nobody's perfect, but no normal person is perfect anyway. Jesus is the only person who's perfect. God's the only one who's perfect. But it just seems so much like this is, if Sony had just let them cook on something and not constantly be like, you need to do this and this and this. Oh, it needs to be live service. Oh, you need to stretch this content out as much as possible. And you're not allowed to use the main person for this. You have to do something, a side character. You have to make up a side character. You can't do Bloodborne, even if I personally don't think they should have remade Bloodborne anyway. It's just that there's so many things here where if things were handled better, this could have been a studio that continued to thrive, because they have done such an amazing job on so many things over the years. And once again, not perfect, but they've done such a great job on so many things throughout the years. And there are so many of even their previous works that they could resell to PlayStation and a PC that would actually bring them a bunch of extra money and easily more than make up for the costs. But no, why do that? I mean, it's one thing when the studio has nothing they're working on, or when they're trying to work on something that's clearly a dead end across the board. But it's a whole different story when it's like the studio says, work on this. They come up with some different pitches, and then they come up with different pitches, and then they finally settle on a pitch. Oh, we like this pitch. Go ahead and give us a demo. You have until this date. And then they cut them off a month and a half beforehand, even though they were on track. And then shut them down. It's just... I don't know what these studios are thinking. And, I've been less critical of Xbox in general, but I think it's largely because of the fact that a lot of the things that Xbox has shut down have not been ones that at least have a history necessarily of being really great, with the exception of Tango Gameworks, and that's a whole different story, which, we talked about previously. But this is one studio where I think they really should have kept them open and at least let them cook enough to get this done, or let them do some of these other things. I still agree. I don't think Bloodborne should ever be remade, at least not anytime soon. But they could have just simply taken those older remakes, released them on PC, and they would have easily made back all their money. Easily. So very easily. It's like, Sony, you're allergic to making money. And it's not even necessarily that I'm desperate to play either of these. I mean, yes, I would definitely buy them. But Shadow of the Colossus, I played it on PS3, the remaster of that. I loved it. I absolutely loved that game. And I would happily buy the remake. I had considered buying it for PS4. I just never did, because I never got around to it. And then, of course, they started putting the games on PC. And I was like, oh, well, maybe it'll come to PC eventually. Now it looks like that's not happening. So, if anything, I'd probably just go back and play the PS3 version again on PC through emulation. And, I mean, Demon's Souls, yeah, I would, even though I would happily buy the remake, I kind of want to play the original more anyway. Especially, with way people have said that it just doesn't quite match the greatness of the original. And I always take some of that with a grain of salt, but I don't know if I really have much else to say. Obviously this whole situation sucks, and I just, this in addition to, the other story we're going to be talking about later, it's very much making me wonder, how Sony thinks this is going to benefit them in any way, shape, or form. Especially with all of the money they could be making off of PC. I mean, even if they never release anything on other platforms, that's fine. But PC, you've already been putting games on PC. You could have given Bluepoint all these projects. You could have even just had them remaster their PS4 games and put them on PC and PS5, and they would have made gangbusters. Probably not on the PlayStation side, but on the PC side, yes, they definitely would have. But no, why do that? Why make any money? And like I said, we'll talk more about that when we get to the topic on the PC side of things. But yeah, that's it. That's what I got. That's where I was cutting myself off.
Oh man, yeah. Going back to what you said about putting Shadow of the Colossus remake on PC and it doing better, I actually would agree with you. I think that definitely would sell much better than the PS5 version, just because there are so many people who would want to play. And even just going back to what you said about how there are a lot of weebs on PC who would buy this stuff. They would definitely buy this stuff. And the fact that Sony did not put Japan Studio Games on here is almost a crime. Just like it makes too much sense that it makes too much sense, and yet why isn't Sony doing it though? That's the troubling thing. Yeah, I mean, I can understand. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely understand. There were some things that, maybe Bluepoint could have done better, or should have done better, but like you said, Sony definitely had a lot in hand with how things were being developed and shaped. Yeah, so I don't think I have too much else to say that doesn't bleed into the following topic.
All right. Well, why don't you take us away on covering that one?
All right. So, supposedly Sony is going to be backing out of putting games on PC. And this is coming from the Triple Click podcast, where Jason Schreier was talking about this, and he, on the topic, he was saying, he said, this quote from him: "The sense I'm getting is that they're being Sony, they're backing away from pulling their exclusive console stuff, like traditional single-player stuff on PC. I think that's going to stop." And then he also said that Wolverine is going to be an example of a game that probably won't ever get a PC version. He also said on Reset Era that what he said was not speculation as well. And then John Lemon of Digital Foundry also echoed that sentiment, saying, "I have an inkling that they're, again being Sony, pulling away from PC. Watch this space. I get the feeling that under the current leadership, PC has become less important. I think console is where they want to be." Additionally, Jez Corden from Windows Central also echoed sort of something that he heard, saying that he had a very good source that PlayStation probably is pulling back from PC. And even Nate the Hate said on X or Twitter that Sony is shifting its release strategy away from single-player games. And the decision to shift away from supporting PC was made last year, as far as that. Jason Schreier also even said, "I'm not sure how super successful those PC releases were." And Jez Corden said that the PC releases didn't even move the needle for them at all. And apparently Helldivers 2 has been the outlier, but the other games did not sell as well. Yeah, and so that's essentially everything that has been stated here. I have some thoughts here and there, but what do you have to say on the matter?
Well, one thing I do want to say ahead of everything else I have to say, I'm sure that, if any PlayStation fanboys watch this, they'll probably be like, oh, PC fanboys are just, butthurt that they're losing the PlayStation greatness and all this other stuff. And, or, that they're coping about it. And I mean, if you want to interpret it that way, that's fine. You can interpret it that way, but here's the reality. Whether they put their games on PC or not ultimately doesn't matter. Now, I think they should. I think it would be the smart decision for them to do that. I think that even if they don't make a lot of money from it, I think they're going to make less money by not selling their games on PC. And they literally have a PC port studio. Now, they may just shift them to only doing live service games, and then the third-party games that they're publishing, like, obviously Death Stranding 2, which is coming in, like 2.5 weeks. Or, probably in the future, there'll be others as well. I can't remember offhand which ones there are, but it's like, I'm sure that Nixus will still get used for some things, and I'm sure they're probably still working on some things that just haven't released yet. But ultimately, whether they release their games on PC or not isn't going to matter to the majority of PC gamers. And it's probably not going to convince the majority of PC gamers to buy a PlayStation console. That's just the reality. Like, I look at myself. Now, I personally, there are a number of PlayStation games that I really, really love. But they're all from older gens. From PS4, PS3, PS2. Those gens have games I would love to see on PC. Absolutely love. But here's the thing. I can already get those on PC. And so it's like, PlayStation, you could get extra money from PC users by selling these older games, or we can do it ourselves. Yes, it's true. PS4, there's still a lot of games that haven't quite made it to the point where they're properly able to be emulated. I mean, like, I know Infamous Second Son, for example, the last I checked, which was, I don't know, probably like 6 months ago, it was still in pretty rough shape. It still needed a lot of work to be running properly. But, remember a few years back, I don't know, what was it, like 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, how Bloodborne was in like really rough shape, emulating it on PC? And look at it today. It runs beautifully. It runs better than it does on the consoles. And PlayStation or PC users didn't give PlayStation a dime for that. And apart from those who actually bought physical copies of the game. And it's like, PlayStation, you lost so much money by refusing to sell these games. And the way I see it is, Sony, if you want to sell me these games, at least, especially the older games that I actually want, I'll happily buy them. I'm happy to give you my money. Even if I have to spend a little bit more initially, or, do a discount, whatever. But if you don't want to sell them to me, I'll do it myself. I'll play the game myself. I'll emulate the PS3 game. I'll emulate the PS4 game once it's ready to go. I'll let the modders take care of it, figure out all the compatibility stuff, and eventually it'll be playable on PC. And if it's never playable on PC, okay, I have plenty of games to play. I also look at, of course, the current releases that are planned. think both the stuff that was that's already been announced, like of course you have Ghost of Yotei that came out last year that isn't on PC yet, and we don't at this point now it's possible it might not come. We have Wolverine coming later this year, which apart from the unfinished version that's on PC right now, may not come. We know that there's going to be some other kind of Ratchet and Clank game down the line, and then there's supposed to be like an X-Men game. There's Saros, which is one that I actually would be interested in playing, but I'm not like, jumping at it to where I'm like, oh, I need to play this right away. Especially because I still haven't finished Returnal. In fact, I didn't even get very far in it, even though I do really like it. But you have these games, and like of those, the only one that I would legitimately probably purchase, well, that I would say that there's a strong chance I would purchase it if it ever comes to PC, is Saros. And even Ratchet and Clank I'm like mixed on, because the story was kind of, some of the messaging in the last game was borderline. Like it didn't cross the line. It didn't quite cross the line, but it was far enough to where I'm like, I could see it crossing the line next time. And like I already saw them cross the line with Spider-Man, so I'd never bought Spider-Man 2. Ghost of Yotei, they crossed the line. I'm not buying Ghost of Yotei even if it comes to PC. But these older games, the PS4 games in particular, I know that at some point, eventually, whether it's sooner or later, they will be playable on PC and in a very good state and in a much better state than they are on the consoles. And the fact of the matter is that Sony won't do anything with these old games, and so instead, people are doing what they have to do with the emulation side to make these games playable on PC, make them better than they've ever been before. Take these games that were already great, make them significantly better because they're going to run better, they can look better, higher resolution, all of that, have mods. And Sony's not getting any money off of it because they're being dumb. So Sony can get money or not. And people aren't going to give them money for these things if they're not going to take the time to actually bring them over themselves. So there's that. Then there's the other side of things. I look at the PlayStation games that I bought on PC, and I have quite a few. In fact, let me just look and see here. I have a list of all the titles that I considered that I have labeled in my PlayStation category. And some of these are ones that were just originally PlayStation exclusives, but are, that were originally released on PlayStation before they came over to other platforms. But let me just look here. So if we're talking about like first party PlayStation games, if I'm putting PlayStation category way down here. So we have Days Gone, Death Stranding Director's Cut, Detroit Become Human, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Final Fantasy X-10 2 HD, Freedom Wars Remastered, Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, God of War Ragnarok, Helldivers, Horizon Forbidden West Complete, Horizon Zero Dawn Complete, Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Spider-Man Remastered, Neo 2, Neo, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, Returnal, Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection. Of those games that I have, and even if I'm sorry, I guess those weren't all first-party games, but even just the first-party games, I have played about half of the first-party games in that list, and the other half I either haven't gotten to yet, or I haven't finished yet. Like Horizon Forbidden West, for example, I haven't finished that one yet. Returnal, I haven't gotten super far into that one yet. Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection, I haven't played more than like an hour of that. And that's only because of the fact that I kind of want to replay the earlier games before I go back to playing Uncharted 4 again. And I haven't even played the, whatever the DLC, the standalone thing that is part of that collection. My point in all this is that if I haven't even prioritized playing these games that I've already bought from PlayStation, if they're not good enough to draw me away from all the other games I have to play, what makes you think that I care that much about playing the new games? Because honestly, I don't. I just don't care anymore. Like, there will be one occasionally here and there where I'm like, ooh, I want to play that. I'm sure, the next time they do a full God of War game, I'm going to be interested in playing it. The God of War trilogy remake, there's a chance I would be interested in playing that. But if it's not coming to PC, I'd be like, that's all right. I'll just play the older games. I have all the older games. I mean, I have the PS3 collection. I have the PS3 God of War collection that includes all of the old games from PS2 and PSP. I have the first two God of War games, the collection on Vita. I have Ragnarok, both on PS4 and PC. Or, I'm sorry, not Ragnarok. Actually, yes, I have both God of War 2018 and Ragnarok on PS4 and PC for both. It's like, I could play those games, and in fact, I haven't played the majority of the old games. In fact, I haven't, apart from playing a little bit of the first game, I haven't played any of those. So, why do I care that much about this? And in reality, I can emulate these. They're going to be better in every way, apart from visually, obviously. I mean, obviously, visually, they're going to be way worse looking. And, yes, there are things I would love to see if they were to come to PC. But does it matter much to me? It really doesn't. And, once again, I'm sure PlayStation fanboys are going to be like, oh, you're just coping. Well, I mean, if that's how you feel about it, okay, that's fine. Like, more power to you. I think that there are some really solid PlayStation games, some games that I really have enjoyed in the past, older games that I would still like to play. But the current stuff just hasn't interested me nearly as much, with the exception of Saros. And even that, I'm not really in any rush to play because I still haven't played that much of Returnal. And I have numerous other roguelikes that I would be interested in playing. I mean, like, even one of the ones that's coming out later this year that I have a lot of interest in, and actually I'm not even sure if that's technically a roguelike, but it's an action RPG along those veins, at least, is I think it's called Blighted. It's the new game from Drinkbox Studios, the developers of Guacamelee and everything like that. I think that game looks great. And I know I can't remember if that one's actually a roguelike or if it's something different, but it's at least an action RPG, a top-down action RPG. But then I have plenty of other roguelikes to play. I mean, even if I don't go back and get the remaining achievements in Hades, or play Hades 2 ever again, I have other ones that I can play, plus ones that are on PC that are not anywhere else. And like, I look at, it's not that I have no interest in any of the PlayStation games, it's just that I don't have so much interest to where it really just like breaks my heart that I won't be able to buy these games on PC. But how little it matters to me? So little that I'm not buying a PlayStation because I don't care enough. I'm long past that point. I've gotten past the point of caring so much that I have to have this platform. I mean, frankly, the only reason I even played God of War 2018 or God of War Ragnarok was because of the fact that I happened to have a PS4. And I mean, yes, I wanted a PS4. I got a PS4 when I did. I mean, it was, a couple years after it launched. And I wanted it. I'm glad I got it. Had a lot of great experiences there. But today, I am in a completely different spot than I was in 2015. I have a lot more games. I have a lot better hardware. I have just so many more options of things to play that, to me, exclusives just don't move the needle for me anymore. Especially with all the modern messaging that they're putting in. All of the nonsense related to that I'm just like, I don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. I don't care if the gameplay is great, if the message is garbage. If this is the kind of stuff I don't want to be lectured while playing a game, then I'm just not even going to touch it. I'm just going to stay away from it, and you won't get any of my money. And I don't really have much more to say on that, except there was one last thing I wanted to say. And let me just... It was on my brain before I talked myself out of it. Or talked myself out of remembering it. Oh gosh, what was it? It's gonna come to me, but I guess in the meantime, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah. So I, with so many people mention, especially credible sources and stuff, mentioning that there is the possibility of Sony cooling down on bringing their games to PC. It definitely seems likely that is the case. And I mean, I think we are sort of seeing that with how sparse their releases have been as of late. And we've definitely seen evidence of it. However, there might be a couple reasons as to why. One could be the fact that just in general, Sony just hasn't been putting out that many PlayStation titles in general on the PS5. I mean, how many titles have they put out over this past year? They put out Ghost of Yotei. They put out what else did they put out this past year? I know they did Ghost of Yotei. I feel like there was something else they put out.
I don't think they did. I mean, they had other. Well, I mean, Helldivers was 2025 as well, wasn't it? Or was that 2024? I don't remember.
I honestly can't even tell. Yeah, I can't even tell if that was. Let me quickly see here.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, let me check my library. That'll tell me. That was. Helldivers 2. Oh no, that was 2024.
Okay. That's kind of what I was thinking. It blurred together. Okay. But yeah. So yeah, last year, I think, I mean, apart from, I mean, they had some exclusives, or at least they were initially exclusive, but they were mostly third-party exclusives.
Yeah, so I think because of the fact that they haven't done so much with the base PS5 or just the PlayStation platform in general, that could be a reason why they're slow to bringing other games over, but at the same time, they could still bring something in the catalog, especially stuff that has already been released on the PS5 thus far. Now, additionally, I think one reason maybe why things haven't been selling as well as Sony would like could be the fact that maybe they're just not bringing their A game. I mean, you can only remake and remaster The Last of Us so many times before people just be like, we've had enough. And it could be the fact that PC gamers just don't want to rebuy it if they played it on PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5 already. Yeah. And I mean, like I said, did anyone really want to get Last of Us remake part 2? I mean, I certainly didn't. And were too many people scrambling to get Spider-Man 2? I mean, I've definitely seen people put some good mods in there, but as far as with the story and stuff, were people really wanting to get into that all that much? I certainly didn't.
Of course, on top of that, it also was a really bad port initially. I don't know if it's fixed yet, but it was definitely bad early on.
Oh yeah, and then also at least on my part, also there's the fact that you play as Miles too. So that was another reason why I didn't get it. But
Maybe the reason why I like Miles is because I'm a partial brother as well.
Yeah, it's like somewhere down the line, it's like your ancestor got you to play the game, and somewhere down my line, there's like an ancestor who wouldn't play the game. But for the games that I did once, I did buy. Like Horizon Zero Dawn was one of the games I would have liked to have seen ported, and I bought that not only on Steam, but I bought that on GOG too. Just because I wanted to also support the fact that there were going to be DRM-free games, and I've purchased every Sony game that was released on GOG. So Days Gone, God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, whatever. Oh, whoops. Just died on me. And then whatever, I can't remember off the top of my head what the other games were on there, but I purchased all of them just because I wanted to support them on that front. Now, at the same time, I didn't necessarily do that for Steam. I really just bought what I wanted to buy. Mm-hmm. Oh, and also I bought the Uncharted Lost Legacy collection on GOG. Now, like I said, I didn't buy everything on Steam. I only bought the games that I wanted to buy, but I still bought the games I wanted. Mm-hmm. But if they had put the other games I did want to buy on Steam, I would have bought them. In fact, I think overall, 2 out of the 4 games that I really wanted have been brought over already. That being Horizon Zero Dawn and Ghost of Tsushima. Those were the 2 games I really wanted Sony to bring over. The other 2 games, they haven't brought over, but I could play them in one form or another. Those being Demon's Souls and Bloodborne. Demon's Souls, I have gotten that to run on an emulator, and considering the fact that the first time I actually did try playing on emulation was on my first gaming laptop, and I was able to get that running surprisingly at 720p 30 FPS. I have no doubt that playing it on my current desktop would perform way better and would have, much better visuals as well.
You can do 60 FPS on Steam Deck.
Well, and I could play on Steam Deck too. So, I definitely have no doubt I could play it there. And I would just have to go ahead and get, Shad PS4 set up for Bloodborne, but I could definitely do that as well.
Yep.
So if Sony won't do it, I can finish up the second half of the games I want.
Yep.
So that's just the thing, is that Sony really just needs to bring over the titles that people really want. Another thing is the fact that when they brought over Horizon Zero Dawn remake, it's like, or was that a remaster? I can't
Remaster, yeah.
remember. Remaster. It's like, okay, sure, you are introducing some quality of life improvements, but at the same time, would it be worth spending more money over something, especially if I have, the original game and I don't want to go ahead and have to try to get all the achievements all over again? Would it be worth spending more money on that? For some people, the answer will be no. And I want to just keep the original game and not have anything to do with that.
Yeah.
Similar to like with the Yakuza games. And then just like other games, like also, and I think as much flack as Bluepoint got for this, I don't think there was there were people who were talking about this, but I don't think it really saw too much out of this. But Until Dawn remake, there were changes that I saw people did not like, especially with some of the lighting and the color grading.
Yeah.
Like people who played the original game did not care for that at all. So that's like one reason why people probably didn't like it. Also, there's another thing that reasons why sales probably aren't doing as well as Sony would like is PlayStation Network requirements. Especially in countries where you can't use or set up a PSN account.
Yeah.
So Sony forcing people to do that, and then also, putting these games being released in countries where Sony does not allow you to have, where you cannot even set up a PSN account. That's just shooting yourself in the foot. That's another reason why, sales probably aren't doing as well as they would like. Now, obviously, maybe overall, that it by itself isn't that big of a hit on sales, but I definitely feel like it could be quite a decent contribution there. So I think there's definitely a lot of stuff here that Sony is just dropping the ball on. But I think we can't necessarily say that maybe it's just, sales on PC aren't doing well, and so that's why Sony's pulling out, because or at least two companies that have worked with, technically four companies that have worked with Sony directly to make exclusives have stopped making exclusives or are possibly even going to stop making exclusives. Those companies being Square Enix, who have been very pleased with PC sales and just general sales as multiplats in general. There's also Kojima Productions, who bought the rights to go, independent, so that way they can do whatever they want to do. There's also, who else was there? Now this one isn't confirmed yet, but there's talks that Shift Up is possibly going to try to become independent and not rely on funding from Sony. So, the next Stellar Blade game could be a multi-plat title, and not just be PS5. Well, I think it was on PS. No, it was not on PC day one. So
no.
The next title could be on PC day one. I know they were definitely pleased with the sales on PC. And then who was the last company I was going to mention? Okay, I forgot who the fourth company was, but at least we have those three companies that have had games be exclusive on PlayStation, and yet because of the sales on PC, or at least multiplats, they said, hey, we want to get out of being exclusive only on your platform, and we want to go everywhere. So the fact that if Sony isn't pleased with their sales, they need to evaluate why they're not doing so well. When the people who are working for them or working with them to make exclusives want to break away so they can stop making exclusives. And like you said, they have Nixxes that they spent money on. What are they going to do with this company that they invested in and purchased for the sole purpose of making PC ports? Now, they could, like you said, just do live service games, but they could still also just still do some stuff here and there, but Sony just has to evaluate what they're going to do. So, all in all, though, if they never port another PC game again, it's a shame. But considering that I have, what's the number here again? Considering that I have 1,036 games in my Steam library.
Alone.
511 titles in my GOG library. And sure, some of them are also in my Steam, but if you just knock off, say, 100 of them, that's still going to be at least 411 titles in GOG. And considering the fact that I also have games that I got from itch.io, and then the plethora of games that I have in emulation, I think I'm going to be good for a while. I still have games that I haven't even touched, and there are games that I still want to go back to. Even games that I've just completed, I just enjoy them so much, I go back to them. So even if Sony does not release another game on PC, that's not going to hurt me in the long run. That's going to be hurting them more than it's going to hurt me.
Yep.
So if they do port games over there, bring more games over, especially if they're the games that I want, so let me put it like that. If they put out The Last of Us Part 1 HD Remix Final Mix Turbo with new Funky Kong edition, I'm not going to buy that. But if they do put Bloodborne Remastered, Demon Souls Remake, that's day one for me.
Yep.
Like, that is easily day one for me. I will pre-order that right off the bat as soon as that's announced. But that's on them. So the ball's in your court, Sony. Just you play your cards right, and I will be there. Otherwise, I'm fine with how things are right now. But that is all that I have to say.
All right. So I did remember the final point I have, but I have a couple other things that I forgot to mention earlier that I just wanted to bring up before I get to my final point. So, first of all, one thing that I think really needs to be emphasized is that while this may be true, still take it with a grain of salt, because even though Jason Schreier does have a reliable track record, and same goes with Nate the Hate. I mean, Nate the Hate in particular didn't seem to actually say outright that there's not going to be any more PC ports of single player games, so that they're slowing it down. But I mean, they've also been slowing down their own single player releases on PlayStation. So what it actually is, that's something that's yet to be seen, and Jason Schreier has yet to actually put out the information. So the question is, beyond these, I mean, he says it's not just speculation. Okay, show some sort of receipts, and I'm not talking about giving away your sources, obviously, but if you legitimately have something and it's not just speculation, give us something more concrete, because what you're saying, especially when you're discussing with John Linneman, who, like, while I will have to say that Digital Foundry, they're really good about some things, and sometimes they're a good source. But when it comes to anything to do with console versus PC, at least with the exception of one of the members who's more of a PC guy, or PlayStation versus Xbox, the Xbox tax on them is ridiculous. They are just constantly ragging on Xbox, and then they will praise PlayStation. And not that they don't criticize PlayStation, they will criticize PlayStation, but they're criticizing Xbox all the time and rarely criticizing PlayStation, or at least much less. And then with PC, sometimes their takes are just really like come on, guys, come on, you can do better. You don't know what you're talking about. It's like you have one guy who knows what he's talking about when it comes to PC, and then there are other guys that are like, you guys really don't know what you're talking about. Now, you might be able to check the number of pixels and the consistency of the frame rate and all that, and it's like, you guys are good at that. But there's sometimes where your takes are just like, you guys need to take a step back and check your biases a little bit better. So, and Jason Schreier, if he's reporting something with some more or less concrete info, I trust his information because he's usually accurate. But when he's talking about something on a podcast and it comes across as speculation because he doesn't give anything concrete, and then he says, oh, well, this isn't speculation, and then more will come later. Until you give me that more later, give me something more concrete, I'm going to take what you say with a grain of salt. Now, I'm treating this as it is true, because of the fact that if it's not true, it's only a benefit. But if it is true, it doesn't make that big of a difference. It's a shame, like you said, but it ultimately doesn't have that much of an impact on us as PC gamers, and on most PC gamers. It's not going to change whether or not we buy a PlayStation. Plain and simple. But my final point that I was wanting to make earlier before I had that massive brain fart is that this isn't going to help PlayStation at all. This is only going to harm its users. Because if they stop putting games on PC, especially their single player titles, and they don't ever go day and date, I mean, which, even without the day and date, even though day and date would obviously be the best way to actually maximize how much money they can make off of PC and actually start making a lot more money off of PC. If they stop doing their games on PC, or reduce it to just the live service games, and none of them hit, ultimately this is going to hurt the PlayStation users, because they're going to start nickel and diming them more and more and more to make up these costs, and PlayStation users are going to get fewer and fewer and fewer tentpole titles. They're going to get even less, and they're going to be paying more. And PC users are going to be sitting just fine. It's like, okay, we don't get your games. Fine. Maybe 10, 15 years from now, we'll be able to emulate them. I mean, all right. I mean, if that's the way you want it to be. But as you said, Sony, the ball's in your court. You can either give us stuff, you can offer us stuff, have the opportunity to make some money, especially, and if you do some of the Japan studio games like Bloodborne, that sort of thing, or even start doing things day and date, make a lot more money, or we can do it ourselves. We can play the games ourselves if we really want to, if we can be bothered. Because the reality is, so many of us have way too many games to play. And so not getting the PlayStation games, I mean, maybe like, oh, I would play that if it was on PC, but since it's not, okay, I'll get back to my backlog. I'll get back to this other game I've been playing, or, that game. Ooh, another shiny game. Ooh, another shiny game. Ooh, I got another free game. Ooh, this one was 67 cents. I mean, it's like, we're
fanatical.
It's funny. I was talking to one of the guys I know who, he's a fellow Steam Deck user, the guy who also got the ROG Ally X. And I mean, he plays on that one way more than Steam Deck now. In fact, I think he plays it instead of his Steam Deck now. But I told him about the number of games that I have on PC, and mine is like about half of what you have. I mean, really, that's about where I'm at. And he just said, I can't even imagine having that many games available. I would be paralyzed by choice. And it's like, well, yeah. I don't know. Actually, one of these days, I was thinking I might sometime soon just go through my entire list of games and start just filtering out all the ones that I'm probably never going to play. Because there's quite a few on Steam, never mind GOG, where there's a lot more of games that I would probably never, that I don't actually want to play, or that I'm not like, ooh, I want to play that. More like, maybe I'll play it sometime. But yeah, so I don't think I really have anything else to say, and it's getting late. So, anything else before we close out for the night?
I guess just one quick question I actually would say. In light of, and this that just popped to my mind, in light of what Microsoft is supposedly doing with the next coming Xbox, possibly being more like a PC, do you think that could be a reason why they are curbing releases?
I would say very likely. That's probably a big part of the reason why they would be doing that. Assuming they are in fact doing that, I think that's actually a big thing. And I meant to bring that up, but yeah, that's probably true. I mean, that would make a ton of sense, because that would make it even less likely that people would buy a PlayStation, because if they could even buy an Xbox, the new definition of what an Xbox is, which is, a PC device, basically, then that would make it so that Xbox users would have access to all those games and would have even less of a reason to buy a PlayStation. And the thing that I see the most about all this, and I'm going to try to just leave this with this one last thought, is that, all these PlayStation users will say that if they don't have exclusives, if their games come day and date to PC, that they won't have a reason to they don't have I mean, what's the incentive to buy a PlayStation anymore? And that's when you have to ask yourself, why? I mean, if that's all that you have to make your console worthwhile, is your console really worthwhile? And if it's not, why aren't you asking for better? But I'm going to leave it at that because we do need to close out tonight since it's very late. Yep. All right. Recommendations and dissuasions. Start us off.
All right. Recommendations. First one is going to be grab a Steam Deck on the Steam store if you can. I actually saw a couple notifications popping up that the OLED has been available. Originally it was the 512 gigabyte model, then the 1 terabyte model. They've been going in and out. So if you've been trying to get a Steam Deck, check in there every now and then and see if they're available or not. And the next thing is, last week I said not to get a Lenovo Legion Go because of the AMD updates that they weren't being supported. It's now safe to get one. Lenovo put out a statement, I think yesterday or something like that, saying that updates for the AMD Z1 Extreme will be continued at least up until 2029. So, you can definitely go and buy one and not have to worry about your drivers not being updated. So that's safe, and you can go get one too. But that's all that I have for that.
All right. So my recommendation, I have a few things here. First of all, if you get a stomach virus, make sure to stay hydrated. And best thing to do is get something like Gatorade or Pedialyte. If you don't like Gatorade, or you don't even Powerade, that sort of thing. But just do small sips at a time, a couple sips at a time, and don't do it too quickly because you're more likely to spew it. And you don't want to do that. You want to actually keep it so you stay hydrated, because otherwise you could end up with a ton of stomach pain, and it is excruciating, and you will regret life at that point. So, yes, make sure that you stay hydrated. Second thing, while I personally will not be getting it because I am not a fan of horror games, Resident Evil 9 or Resident Evil Requiem is absurdly well optimized all across the board. It is on, I think, basically every platform. Every place you can get it, including the Steam Deck and the Switch 2. It is very well optimized, and it's just like they have done wizardry with this. But of course it's, RE Engine, and it's not an open world game, so. But yeah, it's like Capcom is proof that it's possible to optimize a game. If you start with the lowest base and then add the bells and whistles to the higher stuff, everybody benefits. So, okay. Last two things. First of all, the entire series of Psych is amazing. It's hilarious, including the movies. I don't know where you can watch them digitally, but physically, you can get a physical that has all 3 movies. So when I got the Blu-ray collection, it included the 3 movies on a single disc as part of that. So, and then lastly, Dune, the 2021 version, is well worth watching. I can't recommend the 1984 version because I haven't seen it. I heard it's not very good, and it also has sexual content that, thankfully is completely non-existent in the 2021 version. So that's what I got for recommendations. Oh, and lastly, actually, Gotham Knights on Steam Deck is actually worth it now. So wait first. If you don't already own it, get it when it's on sale, because it can drop down to like $5, and try it out on Steam Deck. I think that's probably gonna be my main place to play it away from my main computer whenever I play it in the future. All right. Dissuasions.
All right. Just one thing from me, and that is going to be don't be unwilling to get assistance or help for anything. This is something that I struggle with. Sometimes I don't feel like bothering people. Sometimes I'm a bit too proud to do it, but I think it'll make your life a whole lot easier if you just be willing to ask for assistance, ask for help, because everyone's going to need it every now and then. But yeah, so don't stop yourself from getting the assistance that you need, and go ahead and ask for help. That's all that I have for that.
Very good. All right, I just have one dissuasion written down. I probably had other ones, but I only wrote down one, and that is lime cucumber Gatorade. And that is just because it may have just been because of the fact that I had the stomach virus at the time, but the cucumber flavor and smell was just so strong, and it just did not. I mean, it didn't cause me to vomit or anything, but it definitely was like, I got one swig of it, one little sip of it, and I was like, this is horrible. I'm never drinking this again. And I don't mind cucumber and water. Like, I think that little tiny bit of flavor is nice, but when it's that strong of a flavor, it was just way too much for me. So that's my dissuasion. All right. Where can people find you?
They can find me on my channel. I am Xeracon. That's IAMXERACON. So youtube.com/@IamXeracon. No new content this past week. Deciding what I really want to do for the next video. I do know, like I said, I have the one project that I have in mind, but that's going to be something that takes place over the next month or so, just as I get stuff prepared, but I'll see if there's anything that happens in the meantime. Then I have my other channel, Justin's Bible Blog. That's at Justin's Bible Blog. No new content there yet, but I still have the one video that I am working on right now. And I'll see that'll probably come up in the next week or so when that gets ready. But yeah, that's everything I have there.
All right, sounds good. All right, well, you can find me on my YouTube gaming channel at TheFrozenGamer87. There hasn't been anything new in quite a while. The last thing was that Why I Love PC Gaming video. I'm hoping, though, to record the next, big ones soon. I originally had planned to do it this past weekend, but then I got very sick. So I hope I can do it this weekend. I don't know for sure. It's honestly just up in the air right now because I don't know what this weekend looks like. I can't remember if we have anything scheduled. I know I need to help my son with that, building that catapult or wrecking ball. But, yeah, I don't think that's going to take super long. And so, God willing, I will get started working on those this weekend. Hopefully get some stuff recorded. But that is at least the next thing I have planned. So, hopefully soon. There's the video, or the YouTube and Rumble channels for the podcast. On YouTube, that's at the Orange Box Podcast. On Rumble, it's not a custom URL, but you can still find us there. And the video version of the podcast goes live every Friday at 7 a.m. Central Time, barring any technical issues on both channels. And then the audio-only version goes live on all major audio podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, Deezer, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and others. And then there is... Let's see here. I think that's everything for those. If you want to contact us, you can either send us an email to theorangeboxpodcast@gmail.com, or you can comment on the video version of the podcast, either on YouTube or Rumble. And we actually did get another comment from that same user on Rumble, which tells me it's actually a real person. And so let me just bring that up real quickly. His comment from last week's episode. And I responded from my perspective, but he said, "That was clean gameplay, liked. I've got a small Rumble channel too. What keyboard or controller are you using?" And I told him what keyboard and controller I used. I told him that I thought you were using a DualSense, but is there a different controller you're using, or is that the one you're using?
For what? Did you say what game he was referring to, or just in general?
I think it was just on Hades 2, because I think that was the only gameplay you had from last week.
Okay. Hades 2 probably at the time might have been my DualSense. I know I've been swapping back and forth between that and my DigiPro Vader 4 controller, which is sort of like a Xbox style controller.
Okay.
But yeah, those are the controllers that I've been using.
All right. Well, thanks Knock18 for the comment on the video, and if anybody else has any comments on the videos in the future, we'll be sure to read those on the show. Assuming we don't end up getting to a point where we have a million of them, but I don't expect that to ever happen. So, anyway, let's. That should be everything. So, last chance. Any final thoughts?
No, sir.
All right, well, I am the Frozen Gamer 87. That is I am Zeracon. We are the Orange Box Podcast. And until next time, if you go to Ancestry.com, you too may find out that you are a partial brother. Orange Box Podcast, out.